This is not a lesson in confidence, and it is not about influence in the way most people understand it. If you are looking to be admired, affirmed, or publicly recognized, this will not give you what you want. In fact, it may cost you access to those comforts entirely. There is a form of presence that does not announce itself. It does not persuade. It does not explain. It does not rush to resolve tension or clarify intent. And because of that, it changes the way people behave long before it changes what they think. Most men are taught to reduce uncertainty around themselves, to be clear, approachable, transparent. They learn to narrate their intentions so they are not misunderstood. They learn to perform reliability through constant expression. This makes them easier to work with and easier to place. But being easy to place comes at a cost. When people believe they fully understand you, they stop accounting for you. They predict you. They adjust to you. You become part of the background, familiar, manageable, safe. A quiet aura of authority forms in opposition to that instinct. It lives in the gap between what is visible and what is deliberately left undefined. Not hidden out of fear, but withheld out of discipline. This gap creates psychological weight, not because it threatens, but because it resists reduction. People are deeply uncomfortable with what they cannot fully interpret. When clarity is unavailable, they compensate internally. They fill in blanks. They imagine structure. They assign importance. And often what they construct privately carries more influence than anything you could have asserted openly. This is not manipulation. It is a consequence of human perception. The mistake most people make is assuming that presence must be demonstrated continuously to be effective. They believe authority fades unless it is reinforced. That silence equals absence. That stillness signals disengagement. In reality, stillness often signals containment. A composed presence does not leak information unnecessarily. It does not resolve ambiguity on demand. It does not rush to reassure others of its intentions. And because of that, it introduces a subtle imbalance into social systems that rely on constant emotional signaling to remain stable. You may have already noticed this effect in small ways. Conversations slow when you speak less. People explain themselves when you do not ask. Silence stretches, and instead of collapsing, it draws attention inward. You did not do anything. You simply did not fill the space. This is the foundation of a quiet aura of authority. Not control over others, but control over availability. Not dominance through assertion, but influence through restraint. Historically, those who understood this did not advertise it. They understood that familiarity weakens impact, that excessive transparency erodes gravity, that the visible version of a person should never exhaust the full structure beneath it. This does not require deception. It requires selection. What you choose to show must be stable, consistent, and sustainable. What you choose not to show must remain contained, not hinted at, not performed, not leaked through emotional reaction. Most men fail here not because they lack intelligence, but because they seek relief. They want tension resolved quickly. They want misunderstandings corrected immediately. They want to feel seen and recognized. But relief is expensive. It costs leverage. It collapses distance. It turns presence into performance. A quiet aura tolerates tension. It allows impressions to form without intervention. It accepts that not being fully understood is not a flaw. It is often a condition of influence. This is where discomfort enters. Because once you stop explaining yourself reflexively, people begin to watch more closely. They become careful. They adjust tone and pacing. They reconsider assumptions, not because you demanded it, but because uncertainty forces attention. You are no longer interacting on equal emotional terms. You are not reacting at the same speed. You are not offering the same signals. And that asymmetry subtly reshapes the dynamic. This is not something most men should attempt deliberately. Without internal stability, silence becomes emptiness. Restraint becomes stiffness. Distance becomes withdrawal. And people sense the absence of substance immediately. But if you already feel the instinct to say less, to move slower, to let things remain unresolved longer than others expect, then this presence may already be forming, not as a tactic, as a structure. And once it forms, it does not ask permission to alter how others respond to you. Most people believe authority is created through motion, through constant engagement, through visible effort. They speak often to prove involvement. They react quickly to demonstrate relevance. They clarify themselves repeatedly to prevent misinterpretation. This behavior feels responsible. It feels cooperative. And in many environments, it is rewarded. But it also trains others to expect accessibility. Systems adapt quickly to what is predictable. When your reactions arrive on schedule, when your emotions are readable, when your intentions are explained in advance, people learn how to move around you without resistance. They stop adjusting. They stop hesitating. They stop accounting for depth. A quiet aura of authority interrupts this adaptation. Stillness introduces delay. Delay creates uncertainty, and uncertainty forces systems to slow down and reassess. When someone does not respond immediately, does not correct assumptions, does not rush to resolve ambiguity, attention shifts toward them not because they demand it, but because the system cannot proceed as efficiently without clarity. This is where psychological weight begins to form. Human beings rely on cues to orient themselves. Tone, expression, pace. Emotional shifts these signals tell others how safe it is to proceed, how much effort to apply, how seriously to take the interaction. When those cues are reduced, removed, or neutralized, people compensate internally. They observe more. They assume more. They hesitate. The key is that this compensation happens without instruction. A composed presence does not create pressure. It creates absence of noise. And in that absence, others become aware of their own instability. They notice their own urgency, their own need for reassurance, their own desire to fill the space. This is why restraint feels heavier than assertion. When someone reacts strongly, you can orient against it. You know where they stand, you know what they want. But when someone remains emotionally level regardless of circumstance, there is nothing to push against, no surface to test. Consistency becomes the signal. The emotional temperature remains unchanged whether things are going well or poorly. Praise does not inflate it. Resistance does not disrupt it. Time does not erode it. This stability suggests internal structure, even if no one can see it directly. And people respect structure they cannot fully access. This is not about being cold. It is about being contained. There is a difference. Coldness repels. Containment holds. One creates distance. The other creates gravity. Strategic presentation is often misunderstood as performance. In reality, it is alignment. What is visible must be supported internally. The moment your silence is fueled by avoidance rather than stability, it collapses. The moment restraint is used to appear composed rather than to remain composed, inconsistency leaks out. People sense incongruence quickly. A quiet aura of authority requires congruence across time. Not intensity, not charisma, not presence that spikes and fades, but steadiness that endures boredom, tension, and lack of recognition without seeking compensation. This is why it cannot be rushed. The less you explain yourself, the more others infer. The slower you move, the more weight each movement appears to carry. The fewer emotional fluctuations you display, the more your reactions when they do occur are noticed. This is not a technique. It is a byproduct of internal order. Those who understood this historically did not rely on persuasion to secure their position. They allowed others to project meaning onto their restraint. They allowed time to amplify their presence rather than dilute it. They understood that power does not need constant reinforcement if its structure is sound. When you stop chasing understanding, understanding reorganizes itself around you. When you stop reacting on demand, others adjust their expectations. When you stop offering reassurance freely, people begin to earn clarity through patience. This does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging selectively, with intention, with pacing that reflects internal stability rather than external pressure. Over time, this presence reshapes reality quietly, not through visibility, but through mass, not through dominance, but through gravity. And gravity does not announce itself. It simply alters how everything moves around it. You will not notice the shift immediately. others will. The first sign appears in how people regulate themselves around you. Conversations subtly change pace. Words are chosen more carefully. Humor becomes measured, not because you have demanded seriousness, but because your neutrality removes the usual emotional cues people rely on to calibrate behavior. When they cannot read you easily, they monitor themselves. Another sign is that explanations begin arriving without invitation. People clarify motives you did not question. They justify decisions you did not challenge. Silence creates a vacuum, and most people rush to fill it, not to impress you, but to stabilize themselves. You did nothing to provoke this. You simply did not interrupt the process. Over time, disagreement transforms. Instead of direct opposition, it becomes cautious suggestion. Instead of statements, questions appear. Not because people are afraid, but because unpredictability slows certainty. When someone cannot anticipate your reaction, they reduce risk. You may notice that others speak more while you speak less, and yet your words carry more consequence. When you do contribute, the room adjusts. Attention narrows. Pace shifts. This is not because you are louder, but because you are rarer. Scarcity changes value. Another sign is misinterpretation. Some will perceive distance. Others will project depth. Some will assume confidence. Others will assume disinterest. No single narrative settles. This ambiguity frustrates people who rely on clear social categories to feel secure. But that instability preserves your position. Group dynamics also shift in ways that are difficult to measure. Decisions slow slightly. People look to you before finalizing conclusions, even if you have not positioned yourself as a leader. Your presence becomes a reference point, not because you direct, but because you stabilize. When you are absent, coherence weakens, energy disperses, conversations lose structure. This is often surprising, because you were not visibly organizing anything. Your contribution was structural, not performative. Another sign is patience, not the visible kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that outlasts pressure. Attempts to rush you fail. Emotional escalation does not move you. Delays do not create anxiety. Time works in your favor, because you are not negotiating against it. This unsettles people who rely on urgency as leverage. You also notice a narrowing of your environment. Some interactions fade without conflict. Relationships built on constant affirmation, emotional mirroring, or immediate responsiveness lose momentum. What remains is smaller, slower, and more deliberate. This is not loneliness. It is filtration. Finally, there is an internal sign that matters more than all the others. You feel less compelled to correct how you are perceived. You allow misunderstanding to exist without rushing to resolve it. You accept that not being fully known is not a failure of communication, but a boundary of structure. This requires internal stability. Without it, silence becomes tension. With it, silence becomes space. None of these signs feel flattering. There is no rush, no surge of validation, no sense of winning. What you feel instead is weight, the sense that your presence carries consequence, whether you act or not. And that realization is uncomfortable, because once you recognize it, you can no longer pretend you are operating on the same level of urgency as everyone else. This presence is not without consequence. When you become difficult to read, you also become difficult to approach casually. Ease disappears. Warmth becomes intentional rather than automatic. Interactions carry more weight. And expectations rise even when they are never spoken aloud. People assume you are stable enough to hold tension. They assume you are deliberate. They assume your silence means consideration, not absence. And because of that, you are granted less forgiveness when you falter. This is the price of structure. Some men attempt to replicate this presence by withdrawing without foundation. They reduce expression without developing internal order. The result is rigidity, not composure. Distance without gravity. Silence that feels empty rather than grounded. People sense this immediately. A quiet aura of authority cannot be performed. It must be sustained privately. Your internal behavior must match your external restraint. Otherwise, inconsistency leaks through tone, timing, and reaction, and the effect collapses. This presence also isolates. Not dramatically, quietly. You will be discussed more than you are understood, interpreted more than you are known, and you must be willing to let that happen without correction. The moment you seek to control perception directly, you sacrifice the very structure that created it. This is not a tool for validation. It is not a method for attention, and it is not a shortcut to respect. Men who pursue it for those reasons fail quickly. They grow impatient, they overcorrect, they reveal what should remain contained, and in doing so, they become visible again, and therefore predictable. This presence is only stable when it is not trying to be anything. It emerges when internal order is strong enough to withstand misunderstanding, delay, and lack of affirmation. When reactions are governed internally rather than triggered externally. When time is no longer perceived as pressure. You must accept that mass alters landscapes whether it intends to or not. People will adjust around you. Systems will reorganize subtly. Expectations will shift. Not because you demanded change, but because your presence introduces weight into the environment. This is why it must be used with care. Not everyone is built to carry this kind of gravity. Not everyone benefits from being less accessible, and not everyone can tolerate being unexplainable without becoming isolated or bitter. But for those who can sustain it, this presence does not need reinforcement. It does not need defense. It does not need announcement. It simply exists, steady, contained, and unmoved. And over time, everything around it rearranges accordingly.